What is up, parents? Welcome back to Teenager Tuesday! That's so extra.
It's so good.
My name is Elijah Keck. I'm the student pastor at the McKinney campus, and this is Terry Kelley. What do you do?
What do I do?
Who are you?
Lots of things. Lifelong Cubs fan.
Yep.
I enjoy long walks in the park.
Okay.
I'm the lead worship and production pastor here at Hope Fellowship.
Boom.
Privileged to be so.
You might know this guy from stage. He's always on stage with his guitar singing it up. So he's actually going to lead us in a song.
A cappella.
Acapella, that's right.
Guitar.
We are here. If you missed part one, what are you doing? Go back and watch part one. You're crazy. This says part two for a reason. And super simple. We were talking about worship. And last time we talked about kind of this idea of expression of worship and how do we teach our kids in that. And so the second question that we have is super simple. What are some ways that parents can intentionally, over time, grow their children and worshipers in expression?
Yeah, I think you have to back up because sometimes it's like, well, I'll just model it. I'll just walk around the house and do this a lot, and just try not to run into things. But I really think it really starts with a relationship with Jesus, like an authentic one that is not put on, but more about you're asking God, man, help me in my brokenness. Because some of the best moments with my kids is when I apologize or when I go, well, I didn't do that right.
Yeah.
And I want to, you may have done this wrong, but maybe I did this wrong. And there's an authentic vulnerability that happens that I think in that moment they get to see somebody who's not perfect because that's all of us.
Yeah.
And understanding that worship is not, some Olympic sport of like we have to be really good for a certain amount of time and then we get to worship. But instead, it's for us in our worst moment, in our best moment, in our sinfulness at times.
Yeah.
Because and in our anxieties, in understanding that I think modeling worship is something that isn't for just the happy. That is, but it's also if we see it in Scripture, we see it modeled really well in Scripture.
Yeah.
It's by the depressed. It's by the hurting. It's by the broken.
Yeah, that's
so
great.
all of the above.
I love that. The vulnerability of worship. Like, that's something that's not talked about a lot, but that's really the heart of worship, coming vulnerable to God. Like, if you, and this can kind of be confusing, and I think for a parent, coming from this idea of like, well, my kids are in 4th grade, and they're singing just ridiculous songs in, they're coming home with these crazy songs that are worship songs. And then my teenagers are coming back and they're jumping and doing dance moves to worship.
Yeah.
But I know this type of worship. Maybe give me an idea of how parents can help kind of with that expression. So you talked about that vulnerability, showing that vulnerability, but how does someone who has a 5th grader who is new to worship, not even quite themselves, like into like the slower worship or like that vulnerability side of worship, how can a parent maybe approach a conversation about it, but express that?
I think I would just think in terms of if my kid is attempting to move in the direction of God in their expression.
Yeah.
I'm just pretty excited about that, And if it's awkward, well, that just fits with everything else that it means to be a kid. It's just awkward to be a kid.
Yeah.
It's awkward to be an adult, actually. But as a kid, as a student, it's really, you're trying things on. And
right.
I think you just got to let them try it on. And so whether they're, you do want to expand their expression, but I think you can try to navigate that through a conversation, but sometimes it's just a matter of time. And as they're in situations, being at Hope Students is such an incredible opportunity to try those worship things on because, we invest a lot of time as a worship department, as a production department, to make sure student ministries is really great. We put our weekend people on there on Wednesdays, our weekend musicians.
Yeah.
It's invested in really well.
If your student doesn't come on Wednesdays, they need to come on Wednesdays. It is an incredible experience.
Yep.
I have never, honestly, the best youth worship. I'm not just saying this. Like, this is the best youth worship I've ever seen. It's not just like hey, these people barely made the team. We're gonna throw them on a base.
It's not what we're
but
doing.
It's like, hey, we're giving our best of our best. The people you see on Sundays are the people leading your students on Wednesdays. And I think that's incredible. And I think that's a great foundation of what we have at Hope. But
and I know, just to add to that, it's really, we were talking about today as a worship team that like everybody who's a worship leader at our campuses, as far as from the weekend, they're actually leading groups at their campus. So they're not just there to be on stage and show you how to worship. They're there to get down and live life alongside the kids.
Yeah.
And it's a incredible team.
Yeah, it's like there's no stage mentality,
Right.
Which is awesome, and your students get to see that. Gabe, who leads worship at the McKinney campus, at camp, he was really nervous to do worship and camp.
Yeah.
Very nervous about it, and like, I'm gonna be so tired, but I have to do worship. And I was like, dude, he leads a group on Wednesday nights, and I said, dude, you don't want to miss what God's doing in their lives. And he got to baptize one of his students who, has gone through this crazy story. And he got to baptize him the week after camp. And I was like, and he came out and said, that's what it's all about right there. And so I think just that connection of, it's more than just a stage thing. It's more than just a song. And y'all do an incredible job at picking songs. It's very intentional, and they're different songs. They're not all different than Sunday, but maybe describe that to parents of like, is there a difference in music? Is there a difference in song that they're going to hear?
There's definitely some crossover, but we're pretty deliberate about trying to make sure that the songs that we're choosing for students are, geared towards something that would connect with them. And we feedback from the students, but also on the weekend, thinking about who, it's even a wider demographic, so we think about that. But in all of it, what's really important for us is to, just really think about the fact that we, more than just, is it young or if it's older people, but it's like where they come from, the standpoint of we're trying to reach the old believer. That's like me, that's you. We've been in this thing for a while. The new believer, the person who's really just figuring out, how do I worship? So even as you think, how do you teach students? How do you teach adults? What does this mean? What is, all the things that we do, right? But then we also, our worship, and this is going to be the thing that some people go, what? Is that we're reaching the unbeliever with our worship.
Yeah.
That I think you can make some great cases from what Paul says about worship and how we're, in 1 Corinthians, about how we're supposed to approach that worship experience in a way that has on-ramps for people that don't have faith, because they just might. And I have relatives who are, relatives who are agnostics. And one of my relatives would say to me, he's been to some services with me. He doesn't believe in God or anything. But when they get to the worship part of things, they go, there's just something to it.
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe it. And I would say it like this, it's probably the closest to a maybe they ever get as agnostics. And it's pretty awesome.
I love that. Like, worship's so powerful in that way. And I remember a girl came up to me, and like, I had just preached my hardest sermon. Like, salve every student's crying. And she came up to me after, I gave my life to Jesus. And I'm like, oh my goodness, that's awesome. And I talked about the sermon. She's like, not in your sermon. Waymaker. Knowing that God made a way for, and I'm like, God can move in so many crazy ways. And it's different for every person. What I love is on Sundays, the students that we have come in always go, oh, people are so lame when they worship. And I'm like, yeah, they are. They are.
We're just protecting our knees. That's all.
But, man, so thankful to have worship pastors and leaders that it's not just a stage thing. Like, they're in, Terry's in the conversations when it comes to, where hope is going and what's happening on the weekends, not just what songs do we sing, it's bigger than that. And for your students, like, we take the time and we cultivate an experience for them that God can move in their life, not just in a sermon, but in a song, and that they can have that expression in worship. And hopefully they're coming home, especially those middle schoolers, and saying, man, I had a different experience during worship. And I hope that does happen. So we believe this, that you can do this. You are not alone. God is with you. And so are we, me and Terry.